Hello, YouTube. So the other day I read 3 Feet from Gold in Think and Grow Rich, and it uploaded onto a short. So I would love to read it again so we can get the whole story, and I hope you enjoy it. Page 21, 3 Feet from Gold. One of the most common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. Every person is guilty of this mistake at one time or another. An uncle of R.U. Darby was called by the gold rush, the gold fever in the gold rush days, and went west to dig and grow rich. He had never heard that more gold has been mined from the brains of men that has ever been taken from the earth. He staked a claim and went to work with pick and shovel. The going was hard, but his lust for gold was definite. After weeks of labor, he was rewarded. He was rewarded by discovery of the shining ore. He needed machinery to bring the ore to the surface. Quietly, he covered up the mine, retraced his footsteps to his home in Williamsburg, Maryland, told his relatives and a few neighbors of the strike. They got together money for the needed machinery, had it shipped. The uncle and Darby went back to work the mine. The first car of the ore was mined and shipped to a smelter. The returns proved they had one of the richest mines in Colorado. A few more cars of the ore would clear the debts. Then would come the big killing in profits. Down went the drills. Up went the hopes of Darby and Uncle. Then something happened. The vein of the gold ore disappeared. They had come to the end of the rainbow, and the pot of gold was no longer there. They drilled on, desperately trying to pick up the vein again, at no avail. Finally, they decided to quit. They sold the machinery to a junk man for a few $100s and took the train back home. Some junk men are dumb, but not this one. He called in the mining engineer to look at the mine and do a little calculating. The engineer advised that the project had failed because the owners were not familiar with the fault lines. His calculations showed that the vein would be found just 3 feet from where the Darbys had stopped drilling. That is exactly what it was found. The junk man, he took millions of dollars in ore from the mine because he knew enough to seek expert counsel before giving up. Most of the money which went into the machinery was procured through the efforts of R.U. Darby, who was then a very young man. The money came from his relatives and neighbors. Because of their faith in him, he paid back every dollar of it, although he was years in doing so. Long afterward, Mr. Darby recouped his loss many times over when he made the discovery that desire can be transmuted into gold. The discovery came after he went into the business of selling life insurance, remembering that he lost a huge fortune because he stopped 3 feet from gold. Look at that. Darby profited by the experience in his chosen work, by the simple method of saying to himself, I stopped 3 feet from gold, but I will never stop because men say no when I ask them to buy insurance. Darby is one of the small group of fewer than 50 men who sell more than $1 million in life insurance annually. He owes his stickability to the lesson he learned from his quitability in the gold mining business. I know about that. Before success came in any man's life, he is sure to meet with much temporary defeat and perhaps some failure. When defeat overtakes a man, the easiest and most logical thing to do is to quit. Have you thought about times that you quit and didn't keep going? That is exactly what the majority of men do, or women. More than 500 of the most successful men this country has ever known told the author the greatest success came just one step beyond the point at which defeat had overtaken them. Failure is a trickster. With a keen sense of irony and cunning, it takes great delight in tripping one, when success is almost within reach. Makes me think how many times I've quit. Who knows, my gold would have been there. Shortly after Mr. Darby received his degree from the University of Hard Knocks and had decided to profit by his experience in the gold mining business, he had the good fortune to present on an occasion that proved to him that no does not necessarily mean no. One afternoon he was helping his uncle grind wheat in an old-fashioned mill. The uncle operated from a large farm on which a number of colored sharecrop farmers lived. Quietly the door was opened, and a small colored child, the daughter of a tenant, walked in and took her place near the door. Persistent little thing. The uncle looked up, saw the child, and barked at her roughly. "What do you want?" Meekly the child replied, "My mama say send me 50 cents. Send my mama 50 cents. "I'll not do that," the uncle retorted. "Now you run on home." "No, sir." The child replied, but she did not move. The uncle went ahead with his work, so busily engaged that he did not pay enough attention to the child to observe that she did not leave. When he looked up and saw her still standing there, he yelled at her, "I told you to go on home. Now go, or I'll take a switch to you." The little girl said, "Yes, sir," but she did not budge, not even an inch. The uncle dropped a sack of grain he was about to pour into the mill hopper, picked up a barrel stave, and stared toward the child with an expression on his face that indicated trouble. Darby held his breath. He was certain he was about to witness a murder. He knew his uncle had a fierce temper. He knew that the little child was not supposed to defy him in that part of the country. When the uncle reached the spot where the child was standing, she quickly stepped forward. One step, looked up into his eyes, and screamed at the top of her shrill voice, "My mama gotta have 50 cents, now." The uncle stopped, looked at her for a minute, then slowly laid the barrel stave on the floor, put his hand in his pocket, took out $50, and gave it to her. The child took the money and slowly backed towards the door, never taking her eyes off the man whom she had just conquered after she had gone. The uncle sat down on a box and looked out the window into space for more than 10 minutes. He was pondering with awe over the whipping he had just taken. Mr. Darby, too, was doing some thinking. That was the first time in all his experience that he had seen a colored child deliberately master an adult. How did she do it? What happened to his uncle that caused him to lose his fierceness and become as docile as a lamb? What strange power did this child use that made her master over her superior? These and other similar questions flashed into Darby's mind, but he did not find the answer until years later, when he told me the story. Strangely, the story of the unusual experience was told to the author in the old mill. On the very spot where the uncle took his whipping, strangely too, I had devoted nearly a quarter of a century to the study of the power which enabled an ignorant, illiterate child to conquer an intelligent man. She was a smart girl, definitely so, and persistent. So she wasn't illiterate. That's my opinion. She knew what she wanted. As we stood there in the musty old mill, Mr. Darby repeated the story of the unusual conquest, and finished by asking, "What can you make of it? What strange power did that child use?" That so completely whipped my uncle. The answer to this question will be found in the principles described in this book. Apparently he doesn't know kids. That's my opinion. The answer is full and complete. It contains details and instructions sufficient to enable anyone to understand and apply the same force which the little child accidentally stumbled upon. Persistent little thing. Keep your mind alert, and you will observe exactly what strange power came to the rescue of the child. You will catch a glimpse of this power in the next chapter. Somewhere in the book, you will find an idea that will quicken your receptive powers and place at your command for your own benefit. This same irresistible power, the awareness of this power, may come to you in the first chapter, or it may flash into your mind in some subsequent chapter. It may come in the form of a single idea, or it may come in the nature of a plan or a purpose. Again, it may cause you to go back into your past experiences or failures or defeat and bring to the surface some lessons by which you can regain all that you lost through defeat. After I described to Mr. Darby the power unwittingly used by the little girl, he quickly retraced his 30 years of experience as a life insurance salesman and frankly acknowledged that his success in that field was due, in no small degree, to the lesson he had learned from the child. Mr. Darby pointed out, every time a prospect tried to bow me out without buying, I saw that child standing there in the old mill, her big eyes glaring in defiance. And I said to myself, I've got to make this sale. The better portion of all sales I have made were made after people had said no. Yeah, it's true. He recalled, too, his mistakes in having stopped only 3 feet from gold. But he said, that experience was a blessing in disguise. It taught me to keep on keeping on. No matter how hard the going may be, a lesson I needed to learn before I could succeed in anything. The story of Mr. Darby and his uncle, the little girl, and the gold mine, doubtless would be read by hundreds of men or women who make their living by selling life insurance. And to all these, the author wishes to offer the suggestion that Darby owes to these 2 experiences his ability to sell more than $1 million of life insurance every year. Life is strange and often imponderable. Both the successes and the failures have their roots in simple experiences. Mr. Darby's experiences were commonplace and simple enough, yet they held the answer to his destiny in life. Therefore, they were as important to him as life itself. He profited by these 2 dramatic experiences because he analyzed them and found the lesson they taught. But what of the man who has neither the time nor the inclination to study failure in search of knowledge that may lead to success? Where and how is he to learn the art of converting defeat into stepping stones to opportunity? In answer to these questions, this book was written. The answer called for a description of 13 principles, but remember, as you read the answer, you may be seeking to the question which have caused you to ponder over the strangeness of life, may be found in your own mind through some idea, plan, or purpose which may spring into your mind as you read. One sound idea is all that one needs to achieve success. The principles described in this book contain the best and the most practical of all that is known concerning ways and means of creating useful ideas. Before we go any further in our approach to the description of these principles, we believe you are entitled to receive this important suggestion. Listen up. When riches begin to come, they come so quickly, in such great abundance, that one wonders where they have been hiding during all these lean years. This is an astounding statement, and all the more so when we take into consideration the popular belief that riches come only to those who work hard and long. When you begin to think and grow rich, you will observe that riches begin with a state of mind, with definiteness of purpose, with little or no hard work. You and every person ought to be interested in knowing how to acquire this state of mind, which will attract riches. I spent 25 years in research, analyzing more than 25,000 people, because I too wanted to know how wealthy men become that way. Without that research, this book could not have been written. Here, take notice of a very significant truth, viz. The business depression started in 1929 and continued on to an all-time record of destruction until sometime after President Roosevelt, when he entered into office. Then the depression began to fade into nothingness, just as an electrician in a theater raises the light so gradually that darkness is transmuted into light before you realize it. So did the spell of fear in the minds of the people gradually fade away and become faith. Observe very closely. As soon as you master the principles of the philosophy and begin to follow the instructions for applying those principles, your financial status will begin to improve, and everything you touch will begin to transmute itself into an asset for your benefit. Impossible? Not at all. One of the main weaknesses of mankind is the average man's familiarity with the word impossible. He knows all the rules which will not work. He knows all the things which cannot be done. This book was written for those, listen up, for those who seek the rules, which have made others successful. This is a real thing. And are willing to stake everything on those rules. Kind of reminds me of the great pearl of price. I'll talk about that later. A great many years ago, I purchased a fine dictionary. The first thing I did with it was to turn to the word impossible and neatly clip it out of the book. That would not be an unwise thing for you to do. Just delete it. Nothing's impossible. Success comes to those who become success conscious. Failure comes to those who indifferently allow themselves to become failure conscious. The object of this book is to help all who seek it to learn the art of changing their minds from failure consciousness to success consciousness. Another weakness found in altogether too many people is the habit of measuring everything and everyone by their own impressions and beliefs. Some who will read this will believe that no one can think and grow rich. No, impossible. Possible. They cannot think in terms of riches because their thought habits have been steeped in poverty, want, misery, failure, defeat, sorrow, pain, etc., etc. Don't we all know that story? Look at the programming. These unfortunate people remind me of a prominent Chinese who came to America to be educated in American ways. He attended the University of Chicago. One day, President Harper met this young Oriental on the campus. Well, this book was written during the Great Depression, so there may be words, and I know I did a disclaimer, but these were the times back then, so I'll continue reading the book because this book has good stuff. So let's keep going. So I apologize. I don't want to offend anybody. I'm just reading this book word for word. Okay, continue. Why, the Chinaman exclaimed, "The strange slant of your eyes are off slant. What do we say about the Chinese? We refuse to believe that which we do not understand. We foolishly believe that our own limitations are the proper measure of limitations. Sure, the other fellow's eyes are off slant because they are not the same as our own. Millions of people look at the achievement of Henry Ford after he has arrived and envy him because of his good fortune, or luck, or genius, or whatever. It is that they credit for Ford's fortune. Perhaps one person in every 100,000 knows the secret of Ford's success, and those who do know are too modest or too reluctant to speak of it because of its simplicity. A single transaction will illustrate the secret perfectly. A few years back, Ford decided to produce his now famous V8 motor. Imagine the V8 motor, and now we got the Tesla. Interesting how cars have evolved. He chose to build an engine and the entire 8 cylinders cast in one block, and instructed his engineers to produce a design for the engine. The design was placed on paper, but the engineers agreed, gotta love those engineers, to a man, that it was simply impossible to cast an 8-cylinder gas engine block in one piece. Ford said, "Produce it anyway." But they replied, "It's impossible." "Go ahead," Ford commanded, "and stay on the job until you succeed, no matter how much time is required." The engineers went ahead. There was nothing else for them to do if they were to remain on the Ford staff. 6 months went by, nothing happened. Another 6 months passed, and still nothing happened. The engineers tried every conceivable plan to carry out the orders, but the thing seemed out of the question. Impossible. At the end of the year, Ford checked with his engineers, and again they informed him they had found no way to carry out his orders. "Go right ahead," said Ford. "I want it, and I'll have it." They went ahead, and then, as if by the stroke of magic, the secret was discovered. the Ford determination had won once more. This story may not be described with minute accuracy, but the sum and substance of it is correct. Deduce from it. And you who wish to think and grow rich, the secret of the Ford millions, if you can, you'll not have to look very far. Henry Ford is a success because he understands and applies the principles of success. One of these is desire, knowing what one wants. Have you made your choice? Do you know what you want? That's a start. Remember, this Ford story, as you read and pick out the lines in which the secret of his stupendous achievements have been described. If you can do this, if you can lay your finger on the particular group of principles which made Henry Ford rich, you can equal his achievements in almost any calling, for which you are suited. You are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul. I'm going to read it again. You are the master of your fate and the captain of your soul, because when Henley wrote this prophetic lines, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul, he should have informed us that we are the masters of our fate, the captains of our soul, because we have the power to control our thoughts. And that's true. How many of us probably have thoughts that are self-sabotaging or telling us, no, we can't do that? I'll bet you can. He should have told us that the ether in which this little earth floats, I'll repeat it again. He should have told us that the ether in which this little earth floats, in which we move and have our being, is a form of energy moving at an inconceivably higher rate of vibration, and that the ether is filled with a form of universal power which adapts itself to the nature of the thoughts we hold in our minds and influences us in natural ways to transmute our thoughts into their physical equivalent. If the poet had told us of this great truth, we would know why it is that we are the masters of our fate, the captains of our soul. He should have told us with great emphasis that the power makes no attempt to discriminate between destructive thoughts and constructive thoughts, that it will urge us to translate into physical reality thoughts of poverty just as quickly as it will influence us to act upon thoughts of riches. All right, YouTube, I'm going to stop right here and I will continue again. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.